Have you ever wondered, why does it work that way? Or thought, how can we thrive with Medicare Advantage under these conditions? You're not alone. Jenn has wondered all those things and more. Every month, join Jenn Kerfoot and a motley crew of friends as they bring you candid conversations with industry pros, break down important updates, and share insider tips to boost star ratings. Whether you've been around since before Medicare had the advantage or are just starting out, there's always something new to learn. Welcome to Stars Unscripted.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stars Unscripted. I'm Jen, and today we're digging into something that's recently making the headlines every single day. And it can significantly disrupt how healthcare gets delivered to millions of Americans. So what are we talking about? Tariffs. Yep, tariffs, Medicare Advantage, and what it all means for your 2026 CMS bids, your benefit design, the members you serve, and the possible impacts for star ratings. All right, so let's jump in. So to start, what are tariffs and why do they matter for healthcare? So what do trade wars have to do with your mom's blood pressure meds, annual wellness visits, and star ratings? Well, as I've come to learn, a lot more than you probably think. So for the avoidance of doubt, a quick primer on tariffs. Tariffs are taxes placed on imported goods. They often can be used as a leverage in trade disputes, but the ripple effects hit places you wouldn't expect, like hospitals, pharmacies, and yes, even Medicare Advantage plans. So, a tariff. A tariff, in its basic function, it makes foreign products more expensive. And what that does, or is supposed to do, is encourage consumers, like you and me, to buy local. Yep. Tariffs also generate government revenue and can be used as leverage in trade negotiations, and I won't get into that. But more importantly, who pays for tariffs? Fun fact, importing companies, not foreign manufacturers, pay tariffs to U.S. Customs. These costs are often passed down to you and me when we go to different stores through higher prices. So back in February 2025, the Trump administration reintroduced a 25% tariff on imports to Canada and Mexico and 10% tariffs on China on top of tariffs that were already in place. And while there was a lot of hope that healthcare products might be exempt, spoiler alert, they weren't. And if you can recall back to the COVID-19 pandemic, at that time, there also were tariffs placed on China as well. However, there was an exemption made for healthcare products. This time around, not so much. So why does this all matter? All right, so fun fact, about $303 billion of imported drug, biotech, and device industry goods entered into the United States in the last year. Yep. $294 billion entered duty-free. And this was according to a study done by PwC. Interestingly enough, when I was researching this, healthcare industry professionals in a recent Black Book research study and survey predicted that costs for hospitals and health systems are going to surge by at least 15% in the next 6 months due to increased import expenses. China supplies nearly 30% of active pharmaceutical ingredients, also known as APIs. Not the APIs that I normally think about in my day. But that also is included for cancer drugs, antibiotics, immunosuppressants as well. Also, China also supplies a huge chunk of our personal protective equipment, syringes, generic drugs that are critical to day-to-day healthcare operations. So when these goods get taxed, the costs go up, and the costs go up fast. So it's estimated that pharmaceutical costs are going to raise at least 10% as a result of the China tariff on active pharmaceutical ingredients. Because it's not enough that Part D plans and MAPD plans are grappling with the increased financial liability under the new Part D redesign and the Inflation Reduction Act. So when thinking about tariffs and thinking about my day-to-day talking to Medicare Advantage plans, I started to think there seems to be a lot of vulnerability. So if you work in Medicare Advantage, you already know this is really a fixed budget game. So CMS and what we're in right now, if you're doing the bid at a health plan right now, CMS is going to give a set amount of money per member per month. And this is all done through risk adjustment, the county benchmarks, and also quality bonus payments. But when the cost of care rises because hospitals pay more for gloves or drug costs at the pharmacy, those increases don't get reimbursed. The plan has to somehow absorb it and make the math Math. So it leads us to some tough choices, really tough choices. Do you cut back on supplemental benefits for 2026? Do you restructure networks or tighter utilization management? Or, which is what I don't think will happen, but it could be a possibility. Who knows? I could be wrong. Do plans accept lower margins or risk lower star ratings if members become dissatisfied? Thinking about getting needed prescription drugs, access to care. These are all things to consider as we start thinking about plan year 2026. Tariffs make these decisions harder by injecting uncertainty and inflation into the model just when, you're already under the time crunch to get all of these things done. It was hard enough predicting the Inflation Reduction Act's implications to health plans. Now we're adding tariffs. So this is why it kind of really gets tricky. Let's talk timing. So bids for 2026 are due to CMS in June of 2025. That's just around the corner. And this year, when plans are modeling premiums and pharmacy trends, they're also trying to project what tariffs will be in place. Will supply chains stabilize and will generic prices spike? So, in an interesting example that I was talking to someone about today is that in 2025, plans have increased financial liability in the catastrophic phase. So they're shouldering 60% of costs for brand and generic. So plans are going to have to absorb more cost while keeping member premiums low, benefits competitive. It's not easy. It's really a balancing act. And at this point, after especially the VBID program has been discontinued, a lot of changes don't make happy members. So what will members feel is the next thing that I started thinking about. Because at the end of the day, all the work that we do comes back to what matters most, the individuals who need this care the most. So when thinking about how will this impact people in my life, a couple things I thought of. One, fewer provider choices. If contracts are getting renegotiated or getting dropped, as we saw in 2025 with 7% of Medicare Advantage members looking for a new plan because their plan that they were previously on had done a service area reduction or contract termination. There's also been a lot of providers exiting value-based care arrangements. That's going to have an impact on your members. Another thing, delays in getting medications. So like generics, if those are sourced overseas based on APIs, then there's going to be a delay in members getting the medications that they need. Also, benefit degradation seemed to be the theme of 2025 benefits. So I expect that if we continue to have these pressures from not only Part D costs, but also tariffs, that we probably could see a little bit more benefit degradation or even, some fancy hand waving in terms of combined benefits. Great Milliman study to read about combined benefits if you haven't already. So another thing that could happen is higher copays, narrow formularies, really shifting some cost share to members. And what happens when that all occurs? Dissatisfaction, or as a good friend of mine says sometimes, unexpected surprises. I think that sounds a little bit better. But all of that, what's that lead to? Well, lower cap scores, higher churn, and drops in star ratings. In short, member experience suffers when this financial model buckles. So you might be wondering, after listening to all this, well, Jen, what are we supposed to do under these conditions? Well, my thoughts, there's a few paths forward. And maybe they'll sound familiar to you if you lived through the COVID era supply crisis, which I did. I don't know if you recall people trying to get gloves and masks, and our frontline workers reusing masks. It was pretty traumatic for a lot of people. So, one thing, diversify sourcing. So, you can't rely on a single country or vendor. That's risky. You want to make sure that you have multiple avenues to source things that you need to continue business. Healthcare got a healthcare. Also, strengthen clinical and pharmacy analytics. I cannot stress this enough. You don't know what you don't know, so you need to start getting to know it. So really working with your teams, your analytics teams, any vendors that you might have to start predicting costs. Looking at healthcare not in a silo, but also the geopolitical factors that influence healthcare. All right, so forecast spikes in member behaviors before these all hit. Also, collaborate with your providers. Communication is key. Providers that are delivering care right now are grappling with so many things. They're grappling with, in some states, can they deliver life-saving care and not risk their license when giving different procedures? Additionally to that, they're also grappling with changes in terms of rates. So be kind to your providers and work with them to communicate things proactively. Bring them to the table. Really leverage, if you're on a star ratings team, working with your provider network team, provider communications team, to be at the table when they're having those JOCs. A lot of great things coming out of those meetings. All right. So collaborate with your providers. Also, collaborate and communicate with your members. They want to understand just as much as you do why certain changes are happening. And transparency builds trust. What I like to say a lot in my day-to-day life is, to be clear is to be kind. All right? And most importantly, advocate. Like, engage CMS and policymakers about downstream effects that tariff policies play on health plan solvency and member care. Don't forget, November, we got some midterms coming up. So we got to make sure that we're communicating, but also advocating. I think when talking to a lot of folks, one of the things that stuck out to me most is that people just don't know what impact tariffs have, not only on their day-to-day life or when they're going to Best Buy to buy the latest and greatest new electronic. It also impacts when they go to pick up their medications at the pharmacy. So make sure that you're advocating, you're talking to the folks in your policy department. If you don't have a policy department, check out Milliman, Wakely, the actuaries. They have a lot of great information, but also go to your resources that you have with the associations. So the ACHP, AHIP, BMA, all of these lobbying entities got to be lobbying and advocate that they advocate for your interest and your members' interests, more importantly. So, what do tariffs have to do with Medicare Advantage? Everything. Because when the cost of a syringe goes up or a generic antibiotic becomes harder to find, it's not just supply chain managers who feel it. It's health plans, clinicians, and most of all, members. If your 2026 bid isn't accounting for these pressures, it's time to revisit your modeling and maybe rethink your benefit mix, your risk, and your assumptions. And I know that's really hard because there's so much uncertainty. But amidst uncertainty, there are some things you do have control over, and that's effective communication, making sure that you're engaging all relevant stakeholders, and making sure that you're staying informed. All right, well, thanks for listening today. I hope that as you continue going into your bid process and you're thinking about star ratings and going into caps and Haws season, that you're thinking about all of these large macro pressures that are facing not only your plan, but more importantly, your members. All right, I'll see you next time.